Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. We are here today because Jodi Hildebrant, the therapist for Ruby Franke and the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, has just pled guilty to 4 counts of child abuse in court, and I am shocked, okay? I am really shocked because yesterday I just appeared on the Mothership podcast and we spoke extensively about what was going on with Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrant. And on that podcast, I said I would be shocked if Jodi pled guilty, because everything I've seen about Jodi, all the people who have come forward and spoken about her, her family members, her former clients, they've all represented her as being very much so a narcissist. And I don't use that term loosely. I know it gets used in a lot of different circumstances nowadays, and I'm pretty careful about when and how I use it. For Jodi, I think it absolutely applies. This is a woman who has put everything, her heart and soul and her entire life, into creating an ideology, okay? This is essentially as close to a cult as we can get in many ways, right? Because Jodi was leading a group of people to go forward, teach and recruit people into this made up ideology she created about the term distortion. Okay, so we've got Jodi dedicating decades of her life to creating this, to obtaining education and becoming a licensed therapist, and then going forth and using this ideology that she created to provide therapy to people around her, to include her own family members and her children as well, allegedly. So for me, I was thinking, there's no way that Jodi Hildebrant is going to come forward and plead guilty to child abuse. She's going to stand up and stand by the actions that she took, believing wholeheartedly that what she did was right, because she doesn't live in distortion. And the ideology that she's created is paramount to what anyone else, including the law, has to say about her. But no, I was wrong. Jodi pleaded guilty today, my friend. Jodi in court here with her lawyer, looking very similar to how we've seen her in many other photos and videos before. She's being held at the prison, separate from Ruby. They are not allowed to speak to one another behind the prison walls. I do believe that they've tried to obtain some kind of allowance for them to speak to one another through their lawyers, but as of right now, I don't believe that they've been able to make that happen.
The district court in Washington County, State of Utah, now in session. The Honorable John G. Walton presiding. You may be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to District Court. We are here this morning in the matter of State of Utah versus Jodi Hildebrant, case 231501763. Mr. Clark and Mr. Sham are here representing the state of Utah, and Mr. Terry is here with.
To make it clear, Jodi's lawyers are extremely expensive, and Jodi is someone who allegedly has a lot of money backing her. She made her money through her therapy business, but let's be honest, I'm sure that Ruby contributed highly to the income Jodi has been receiving over the past decade. And in many ways, we can see that Jodi was using rich, powerful, successful people to bring income to feed her own lifestyle. When Ruby's son was found escaping from this enormous home in Utah, we were made aware that Jodi was living in like a $2 million home with barricades and protections all around. This woman has moolah, and she's spent it to get the best kind of legal representation, and still, it seems like things are so bad that Jodi had no choice but to plead guilty.
We are scheduled for a waiver of preliminary hearing. Mr. Terry, appears you have just handed the court a signed plea agreement.
That is correct, Your Honor. With respect to the waiver, Ms. Hildebrant, we have had discussions. She fully understands the purpose of a preliminary hearing, what the burden of proof would be, and that she has the right to a preliminary hearing, but in conjunction with the entry of her plea today, we waive the preliminary hearing.
And in fact, there is a provision in the written plea agreement that operates as a waiver of the preliminary.
They've waived their preliminary hearing where they would get to hear, and we would all likely get to hear, about some of the evidence that the police and investigators have found and are going to use against Jodi and Ruby if they decided to take this to court. But obviously, it was too much. There was a mountain of evidence against them, and Jodi has no choice but to plead guilty here.
Ms. Hildebrant, I've been handed a written document, a plea agreement with your signature on it. Did you sign that document?
Yes.
And you did that to represent to the court that you have read the document carefully, that you understand what you've read, that you agree to all of the terms that are set forth in that written document?
Yes, sir.
You've had sufficient time.
Taking a look at Jodi here, I have to wonder what is going through her mind right now. Is she standing here like, I'm the only one in this courtroom not living in distortion? I think that it's possible Jodi's willing to say, yes, I'm guilty under your laws. Now, your laws are not as good as my own private laws and my own private practice coming from my own ideology that I've created. You're all living in distortion. But because I have no choice, because I still live in the United States of America and I have to follow the rules, I have no choice but to say, yes, I am guilty under the way that your laws operate. So sure, I'm guilty of these things, but they are the right things when you actually live outside of distortion, guys. We have Jodi here. She's going to have to bow down and say, yes, you're right, I have to go to prison. But I wonder if deep down in her heart and in her mind, she's saying to herself, this is just one effed up court system. They don't understand what's going on here. I'm the one who was right. And I'll soldier on. I'll carry on in prison, creating my own army of female prisoners who I can get out of distortion and bring over to my way of thinking.
To ask Mr. Terry any questions that you have about the agreement or its potential effect.
Yes.
Is anyone pressuring you to enter into this agreement, or is anyone promising you anything that I haven't been told about or that is not in the written document?
No.
Are you under the influence of alcohol or drugs today?
No.
Is there anything today that could interfere?
I find it interesting, Jodi's facial expression when she replied to, are you under the influence of drugs or alcohol? Her facial expression has stayed mostly neutral throughout this, but when she responded to that question, there was a little smirk. No, of course not. Because one thing about Jodi Hildebrant that I've researched and come to understand is that she, like many people identified by the Mormon Church as being appropriate types of therapists for people who are Mormons, will try to steer people away from all forms of medication, even caffeine, although Mormons are allowed to drink caffeine now, but they will often tell people that you need to get rid of all these pollutants in your body. ADHD medication, hell to the no. Antidepressants, no ma'am. It's almost like Jodi is letting us all know with that little smirk, I'm not on any medication, Judge, and I never will be. Mental illness, no. I'm living outside of distortion.
In any way with your ability to understand the agreement, its potential consequences?
No.
No physical condition, mental health, or emotional condition, nothing that could interfere with your present ability to evaluate the agreement and decide if...
No, sir, this woman is living outside of distortion. Unlike you and the rest of you on the court, obviously Jodi is going to say, no way. No mental health issues here. I'm ready to plead guilty because you got me. Under your laws, your false premise of a law, I am guilty. But in my heart and my mind, I'm good to go.
If it's what you're prepared to do today.
No.
You don't need more time. You're ready to go.
Yes.
Any further record, counsel?
Your Honor, the agreement contains a factual basis. There are a few details in the factual basis that we are not in full agreement with. However, this is a guilty plea. It is not an Alford plea. The factual basis sets forth facts that...
Interesting. This was not stated in any way, shape, or form at Ruby Frankie's trial. This lawyer is putting out there, yeah, okay, we're pleading guilty, just so you know, but there's some factual things in this plea that we don't exactly agree to, but it's not an Alford plea. Yes, we're guilty. But just putting it out there, there's some factual things Jodi wants me to tell you she doesn't agree with. So when we see whatever it is that Jodi has pled guilty to, it may be exactly the same as what we saw with Ruby Frankie, all of the same crimes, the same disgusting behaviors towards children. Jodi is letting us know that she doesn't agree to all of it. She's pleading guilty and she'll accept that she did it, but she wants us to know she doesn't agree with all these facts. That's very Jodi. What I'm seeing here is a woman who has no other choice. She has been told, oh, look, the only way that we can shorten the time you're going to stay in prison is for you to plead guilty so it looks better to the parole board and to the judge that you have not put these children through a court battle where they have to testify against you. If you want the best chance of getting out as quickly as possible, this is what you need to do. And that is likely the entire reason why she is pleading guilty.
We agree with, that Ms. Hildebrant agrees with, that are sufficient for the court to accept her plea with respect to the 4 counts to which she is pleading guilty. And so we ask the court to accept her plea agreement.
To me, she looks grieved here, but grieved about what? I think about everything she's losing: the money, the power, the fame, the upward rise, because she was on her way up with Ruby funding all of it. You have to wonder what the people at home who have still been supporting Jodi, all of those people who were trained in training other people on her therapy, people who were working for her, what they are thinking right now. Do they accept that something wrong has been done here? Or are they kind of like, well, Ruby and Jodi, they just have to plead guilty. They don't have any other choice, but really, that's under the laws of the United States. But our own personal laws, our own personal morality tells us that they were right to do what they had to do. It's scary if there's a whole legion of people sitting underneath Jodi Hildebrant still believing that.
Apart from what is in the written factual base in the plea agreement, you have, I'm assuming, reviewed voluminous discovery. You don't dispute whether there is an actual or an adequate factual basis.
We do not.
All right, then. Anything else before the court receives Ms. Hildebrandt's pleas?
No, Your Honor.
Nothing for the state, Your Honor.
Then, Ms. Hildebrandt, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, also aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
The court finds that there.
So she pled guilty to 4 counts. There are some that she is leaving off the table, and that was probably part of the plea deal. We saw the same thing with Ruby Franke. So that's interesting. Jodi and Ruby are saying that there are a couple of things that the state is accusing them of that they refuse to plead guilty to.
There is a sufficient factual basis. The court, in addition, finds that Ms. Hildebrandt's pleas are made knowingly and voluntarily. The court therefore accepts and enters those pleas, dismisses the remaining 2 counts.
Now, here's what's interesting. Take a look at this judge. A lot of people are waiting for the next court date with the judge to find out what the sentencing will be for Jodi and for Ruby. And I'm here to let you know that that's not going to happen. The judge actually, in this case, in this state, in this circumstance, does not determine the sentencing. Okay? What's actually going to happen is that Jodi and Ruby are going to prison where they will await appearing in front of a parole board. And it is the parole board that will determine their ultimate sentence. And that's part of the reason why the judge can't really give a firm idea of like how many years each defendant is going to get at this point in time. I also find it interesting because through my research, I've come to understand that going to a parole board may mean that there are just different circumstances which are considered than would be directly in front of a judge. So a lot of people are saying that Ruby would be expected to get a lighter sentence, maybe 5 to 7 years, with Jodi getting a little bit more time, up to, I don't know, they say 10 to 20 years, more likely 10. These people don't have a prior record, and that is going to be part of what the parole board looks at. They don't have, as far as we know, other situations in their past in which they were found guilty of a criminal type of crime. Okay, so that's going to be a major factor in determining their sentencing. But what I'm hearing is that the parole board may not look as kindly on Ruby as we all kind of expect them to, that Jodi would be held more accountable for what happened because she was the therapist. I'm hearing that a parole board is more likely to see both of them as equals when it comes to the law. They're really going to be looking at their past and other factors that will determine whether or not they should get a longer or shorter sentence. So it's very difficult to prophesize what's going to happen here, you know, but maybe Jodi and Ruby can call on Joseph Smith in their dreams to give them some more information about what's coming down the pipeline for them.
We are anticipating a PSI, although part of the plea agreement appears to be that Ms. Hildebrant will not contest a prison sentence.
Correct.
Is that right?
That is correct. But we are asking for a PSI.
All right, then the court orders the preparation of a pre-sentence investigation report and sets sentencing at.
So that's the next step. The court and all of the lawyers are going to be working on a pre-sentencing report. This is when the lawyers put everything together to show what kind of person Jodi was before all of this happened. Does she have a history of crimes? Does she have a family that she's committed to? Like, what things does she have going on out in the real world that would make her very redeemable to society? And one, I would call it unfortunate. It's unfortunate that there is no legal prior history, as far as I know, that can be brought up to show a pattern of what happened here with Jodi specifically, because we know that there is a pattern. Jodi's family members and former clients have stepped forward, and all of this has been done before and probably will be done again, my friends. Those are the facts. Jodi she's participated in these kinds of horrible, awful therapy tactics in the past. She's broken apart families. She has caused people to have severe mental health issues that they probably didn't have when they started with her. And yet it doesn't seem as though any of that is going to be able to be brought up when it comes to sentencing with the parole board, unfortunately.
10:30 a.m. on February 20th. Anything else for today, counsel?
On February 20th, they'll reconvene. My understanding is that will be like an initial meeting that they have before going to the parole board.
Nothing from us, Your Honor.
Nothing from us, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. We'll be in recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And we see Jodi kind of hobbling away. Her two attorneys are there. Once again, the kind of attorneys that I couldn't afford in my real life. Wow, I am surprised. I'm surprised that Jodi pled guilty. I'm surprised that she is willing to essentially, it seems like, throw away her life. Her whole life has been dedicated to creating this type of therapy, this ideology, this way of interacting with clients. You know, what is she going to do after she's finished with her prison sentence? Who knows? At this point, like I've said, it's possible that many people who follow her will say, like, okay, she had to plead guilty. She had no other choice, but we still believe in the concept of distortion, and she can lead us from her jail cell, where she'll become even more of a martyr for all of us. If that's the case, people in Utah better watch the heck out, because once a cult leader, always a cult leader. And from my point of view, there are some creepy things going down in Utah right now. All right, much love to all of you. Thank you for being here with me tonight. I hope you're aware that this is not a negative condemnation on all Mormons, all people in Utah, all people around Jodi and Ruby. Not at all. Everyone stands on their own. Everyone uses their religion in their own personal way. We've seen this kind of creepy, crazy cult type of mentality in every type of religious setting across the world. And we've also seen people who use religion for the betterment of themselves and others. So this is not a negative condemnation on anyone except for Jodi Hildebrant, who needs to face the consequences of abusing 2 small children who did not deserve the mental and physical torture that they were put through under her care. I hope you guys have a great night. I'm excited to start moving towards the new year. Christmas was, beautiful. Not perfect, but beautiful in its own way for me. I hope you made the best out of it. I know not everybody's holidays are going to be perfect, but we're moving into the new year and I'm excited about it. So glad to have you here with me tonight, and I hope that you'll join me again tomorrow as we head down another rabbit hole.